They didn't strike her, didn't throw her down. They didn't have to. They cut open her uniform shirt, slowly, deliberately, with a training knife that wasn't meant to wound, only to humiliate. 3 men, 1 corridor, no witnesses. 3 Marines standing too close. 1 woman being treated like entertainment. And silence they mistook for submission. They called it correction. They called it form adjustment. But what it really was, sexual harassment in uniform. Assault disguised as training. Predation masked as discipline. What they didn't know was that the woman they were cornering wasn't prey. She was a Navy SEAL, Tier 1 operator, SEAL Team 6. And by the time that knife hit the ground, all 3 would be flat on their backs, disarmed, disoriented, done. But before we show you exactly what she did next, and the silent move that made the entire base fall quiet, you need to understand how she got there. Because this story doesn't start in a corridor. It starts 3 weeks earlier, in a Virginia apartment, with a woman who'd spent 15 years learning that the worst battles aren't always fought overseas. The apartment was small, 3rd floor walk-up in Arlington, Virginia. No decorations, minimal furniture. The kind of place where someone lives who's never really home, where deployment schedules matter more than lease agreements. Commander Elena Thorne sat at a wooden table that had seen better decades, her hands flat against worn manila folders, her jaw tight with the kind of focus that came from knowing the truth and being unable to prove it. Yet, 33 years old, dark hair cropped military short, eyes the color of winter steel, sharp enough to cut through excuses and lies with equal efficiency. They called her Frost, not because she was cold, though she could be, but because she was precise. Once Elena Thorne locked onto a target, God himself couldn't make her miss. The folders spread before her told a story she'd seen before. 7 formal complaints, 18 months, 4 female Marines transferred out to different bases, careers derailed, dreams abandoned, 3 complaints withdrawn after what the paperwork called peer counseling sessions, a bureaucratic phrase that meant intimidation, isolation, pressure applied until silence seemed safer than speaking. All of it signed off by the same man, Major Vincent Cross, executive officer at the Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility in California. 53 years old, silver hair, hard eyes, the face of someone who'd learned that power plus patience equals impunity. A man who'd been accused of similar behavior 28 years ago at Quantico. Back in 1996, when he was a lieutenant, fresh-faced, 25 years old, with a senator's nephew privilege and a victim whose testimony wasn't deemed credible. Because the system protected those who knew how to work it. Elena's phone buzzed. Encrypted line. She answered without preamble. Thorne. The voice on the other end was calm, controlled. The kind of voice that could talk you through defusing a bomb or inform you of your own death with equal composure. Colonel James Aldridge, 69 years old, Pentagon consultant. The man who trained her 15 years ago, 2009, when she was 18 and the Navy was just beginning to open SEAL training to women who could meet the standard. Not a lowered standard, the same standard that had been breaking men for decades. Commander, Aldridge said, you reviewed the files I sent? I did. Elena's voice carried no emotion. Years of operations had taught her to keep feeling separate from function. Pattern matches Quantico 1996. Same executive officer, same tactics, same outcome. Complaints dismissed, victims disappeared. Not this time. Aldridge's voice shifted, something harder underneath. Something that sounded like old guilt finally finding its target. This time we have opportunity. Admiral Sterling is requesting integration assessment. Anonymous officer, no rank visible, just numbered armband. You'd go in as observer, but what you'd really be doing is becoming the target. Elena finished the thought. No hesitation, no question. Let them hunt me. Silence on the line. Then Aldridge's voice, quieter now. I wouldn't ask this if I thought there was another way. But these men, Corporal Trent Holloway, Lance Corporal Garrett Voss, Private First Class Dylan Kane, they've learned from Cross. They've learned that the system protects them, that complaints disappear, that victims eventually give up. He paused. They hunt because hunting works. Until it doesn't, Elena said. Until it doesn't, Aldridge confirmed. I need you in California. Anonymous evaluation, integration officer, low profile. And when they bite, because they will, I need you to show them what a Tier 1 operator looks like. Elena leaned back in her chair. It creaked. Everything in this apartment creaked, as if the building itself was tired of holding secrets. Rules of engagement? Observe until they cross the line. Document everything. And when they do cross it, because they will, you handle it your way. Just make sure there are enough witnesses that nobody can call it a misunderstanding. Copy that. When do I ship? 48 hours. I'll have your cover credentials ready. Anonymous integration officer. No rank visible. Just numbered armband 177. Low profile. Elena's hand moved to the locked drawer in her desk. She hadn't opened it in 6 months. Hadn't needed to. But tonight, she needed the reminder of why this mattered. Of why some missions couldn't be declined. Sir, her voice shifted, softer but no less certain. What's the real story here? Aldridge was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried weight. The weight of 28 years. The weight of failure that never quite heals. The real story is that I failed someone once. Quantico, 1996. Lieutenant Diana Ashford, 24 years old. Exemplary service record. She filed formal complaint against then-Lieutenant Vincent Cross. He paused. I was the investigating officer. I recommended discharge. Command overruled me. Political connections. Insufficient evidence. The usual bureaucratic machinery that protects predators and destroys victims. Elena heard him take a breath. Diana Ashford was forced into early retirement 6 months later. Medical discharge. Stress-related adaptation issues. That's what they called it. What it really was, systematic destruction of a good officer because she told the truth and the system decided her truth didn't matter. And Cross? Elena already knew the answer. Promoted, transferred, allowed to continue operating. I tried to reach Diana 3 times over the years. She never responded. And I understand why. Because speaking up hadn't saved her. It had ended her. Elena opened the drawer. Inside was a photograph. Naval Academy 2009. She was 18 then. Young, eager, standing in formation with her class. But if you looked closely at the photo, you could see the bruising along her left wrist. The carefully neutral expression that was really controlled fury. And in the corner, barely visible, the edge of a document stamped in red ink. Dismissed. I understand, Elena said quietly. When do I leave? 48 hours. A pause. And Elena, don't fail. I won't. The call ended. Elena sat in silence for a moment. Then she picked up the photograph. Her 18-year-old self stared back. The girl who'd filed a complaint against a senior instructor. The girl who'd been told she was too sensitive for military service. The girl who'd been advised to consider a different career path. That girl had 2 choices, quit or endure. She chose endure, but she shouldn't have had to make that choice. Nobody should. The senior instructor had cornered her in a supply room during her 2nd week, tried to touch her, told her this was how things worked, that if she was smart, she'd understand. She'd understood that she needed to fight. She'd filed the complaint the next morning, detailed, documented, with witness statements from 2 classmates who'd seen her leave the supply room, shaking. 3 days later, she was called to the commandant's office, not to discuss her complaint, to discuss her fitness for service. You seem to be struggling with the rigors of academy life, Cadet Thorne. Perhaps you're too sensitive for military culture. Have you considered that this environment might not be the best fit for you? The complaint had been filed. The investigation had been opened. And then quietly, it had been closed. Insufficient evidence, conflicting statements, the instructor's word against hers. And he had 15 years of service. She had 15 days. But there had been one person who believed her. Visiting instructor, Colonel James Aldridge. He'd pulled her aside after a training exercise. "I read your complaint, cadet. I believe you. What happened to you was wrong. The system failed you. But here's what I'm going to teach you. You don't need the system to make you strong. You just need yourself. And I'm going to show you how to make sure you're never powerless again." He trained her separately, extra combat drills, hand-to-hand techniques, knife work. Not because he thought she was weak, because he knew the world was full of predators. And the best defense was capability. "Real warriors don't hunt the weak," he told her. "They protect them. Remember that. And when you're strong enough, use that strength to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else." 15 years later, Elena was keeping that promise. She locked the drawer. Then she stood and moved to her bedroom. In the closet, behind the civilian clothes she rarely wore, was a black duffel bag. Inside it, the tools of her trade. Encrypted sat phone, micro recorders no larger than buttons, digital camera with telephoto lens, and wrapped in a towel, a knife. Not her standard issue blade. This one was older, worn grip, well-maintained edge. The blade was inscribed with 3 words: "Patience kills arrogance." Aldridge had given it to her when she graduated SEAL training in 2013. She was 22 then, one of the first women to complete the program. He'd carried this knife through Grenada in 1983, through Operation Urgent Fury, through tunnel combat beneath St. George's, where 4 Marines were trapped and a first lieutenant named James Aldridge saved them with knife work and patience. The knife had saved his life 6 times across 3 continents. "This taught me everything about patience," he'd said, placing it in her hands. "About waiting for the exact right moment, about letting the enemy commit before you strike. It's yours now. Use it to protect those who can't protect themselves." Elena tested the edge. Still sharp, still ready. Like her. She began packing, minimal gear, change of uniforms, toiletries, nothing that suggested anything beyond another faceless integration officer doing time until rotation ended. But in the bottom of that duffel, wrapped carefully, her real equipment: the recorders, the camera, the encrypted phone, and the knife. Everything she'd need to document predators and then dismantle them. As she packed, her mind went back 6 years. Afghanistan, 2018. She was 27 then. SEAL Team 6. Hostage rescue operation in Kandahar province. Taliban compound. 7 hostiles. 2 American contractors being held in an underground cell. The compound was fortified, hardened positions, overlapping fields of fire. Any direct assault would have resulted in hostage execution, so Elena had waited. 4 hours in a sniper hide, watching, learning patterns, letting the enemy grow comfortable, letting them believe their position was secure. At 0300 hours, when the guards were drowsy and discipline had slipped, she'd made her move. Silent entry, close quarters combat through narrow corridors. 5 enemies neutralized with knife work and suppressed pistol shots. No alerts raised. 2 hostages extracted within 8 minutes. 0 friendly casualties. Post-mission debrief, Aldridge had called her from the Pentagon. His first words: "Exceptional patience, Commander. You waited for the perfect moment. That's what separates good operators from great ones. You've learned the lesson well." She'd learned it from him. The Grenada Doctrine, the tunnel principle. Wait until the enemy commits fully. Wait until they believe they've won. Then strike with such precision they never see it coming. That's what she'd do in California. Let the predators hunt. Let them believe they'd found easy prey. Let them commit to assault. Document every step, and then show them what a Tier 1 operator looked like when patience transformed into violence. Elena zipped the duffel bag, checked her watch. 2,200 hours, 46 hours until wheels up. She had work to do. She returned to the table, opened her laptop, pulled up the personnel files Aldridge had sent. Not the official records, the real ones. The kind that only SOCOM investigators could access. Corporal Trent Holloway, 27 years old, 5 years in service, combat deployments to Iraq and Syria, exemplary performance reviews. But if you dug deeper, if you looked at the pattern of transfers, something emerged. 3 different units in 5 years. Each transfer coinciding with informal complaints from female personnel. Nothing official, nothing documented, just whispers, rumors, women requesting reassignment without explanation. Lance Corporal Garrett Voss, 25 years old, built like a linebacker, 240 pounds of muscle, served under Holloway in 2 of those units, always transferred within 60 days of Holloway's moves. The pattern suggested coordination, partnership, pack hunting. Private First Class Dylan Kane, 24 years old, the youngest, the smartest, high scores on tactical assessments, recommended for advanced training, but 3 female Marines had requested transfers from units where he served, all within 6-month windows, all citing personal reasons that weren't really personal. Together, they were dangerous, not because of individual capability, though they had that, but because they learned to coordinate, to hunt as a unit, to identify victims who couldn't fight back, to exploit a system that protected them as long as they avoided official documentation. They'd learned from the best. Major Vincent Cross, 28 years of predation, 4 bases, 16 documented victims, estimated 30+ unreported. A man who'd turned protecting predators into an art form, who'd coached them on avoiding paper trails, who'd perfected the peer counseling system that made complaints disappear. Elena studied Cross's photo. 53 years old, silver hair, hard eyes, the face of someone who'd learned that power plus patience equals impunity. That if you work the system correctly, you could operate indefinitely. That victims eventually gave up. That silence could be enforced through institutional machinery. He was about to learn differently. Elena closed the laptop. She had what she needed: context, pattern, target identification. Now she needed rest, because in 46 hours she'd be entering a combat zone. Not Afghanistan, not Syria, somewhere more dangerous. An American military base where the enemies wore the same uniform she did. She lay down on her bed, didn't bother changing. Sleep came easily, not because she was relaxed, because she'd learned long ago to sleep on demand, to take rest when available, because you never knew when the next opportunity would come. Her last thought before sleep was a memory, not the complaint, not the dismissal, something later, something better. SEAL graduation day, 2013. She was 22, one of the first women to complete the program. Standing in California's sun, Aldridge placing the trident in her hands. You've earned this, not because I trained you, but because you refused to quit when quitting was easier. You've proven you belong, not by demanding it, but by demonstrating it. And now you carry a responsibility to honor this trident, to protect those who can't protect themselves, to be the warrior this nation needs, even when that means standing against those who wear the same uniform. He'd paused, especially when it means that. She'd understood the words then, but she understood them differently now. Because the hardest fights weren't always overseas. Sometimes they happened in equipment bays and training facilities. Sometimes the enemy was institutional rot. Sometimes the most important battles were the ones nobody wanted to acknowledge existed. Tomorrow she'd begin preparing. The day after, she'd fly to California. And 4 days from now, in a corridor where no cameras reached, She'd give 3 predators exactly what they'd been hunting for, just not in the way they expected. 48 hours later, California, Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility, 20 miles inland from the coast. Desert heat pressing against everything like an interrogator waiting for someone to break. The base sprawled across 600 acres, training yards, obstacle courses, combat simulation buildings, barracks arranged in precise rows, everything regulation, everything squared away. On the surface, it looked like discipline, order, the backbone of military excellence. But Elena Thorne knew better because she'd spent 15 years learning to look beneath surfaces, to read the spaces between words, to recognize the patterns that revealed truth when everyone was trying to hide it. She arrived at 0600 hours. No fanfare, no welcome committee, just a Humvee that dropped her at the admin building and drove away without comment. She wore standard fatigues, no rank insignia, no name tape, just a numbered armband, 177, clipped above her left elbow. Anonymous integration officer. Another face in the crowd, exactly as planned. Inside the admin building, a staff sergeant barely looked up from his terminal as he processed her paperwork, handed her a facility map, pointed toward the barracks. You're assigned mixed unit training rotation, 0700 formation, equipment bay for gear issue. Any questions? No. He looked at her then, really looked, taking in the buzzed hair, the scar tissue along her knuckles, the way she stood with weight balanced, ready to move in any direction without telegraphing intent. His expression shifted slightly, recognition without understanding, the sense that she was something other than what she appeared. But he said nothing, just stamped her papers and waved her through. Elena walked across the yard, morning light breaking over the eastern fence line, boots striking packed earth in rhythm with 100 others. The base was waking up, coming alive with controlled chaos of training rotations, voices barking cadence, the metallic clatter of weapons being prepped, the smell of sweat and dust and diesel exhaust. She'd been in places like this 100 times. Afghanistan, Iraq, training facilities across 3 continents. But this was different, because this time she wasn't here to train, she was here to hunt. And the prey wore the same uniform she did. The barracks were standard, triple bunks, metal lockers, concrete floors. She found her assigned rack, middle bunk, back corner, and stowed her gear. The duffel went into the locker. On top, the civilian clothes and standard toiletries. Nothing interesting, nothing worth investigating. But at the bottom, wrapped in a towel, her real gear. The equipment that would document everything. The tools that would transform observation into evidence. 0700 formation came fast. Mixed unit. 60 Marines and sailors rotating through cross-branch training. The goal? Integration. Learning to fight alongside different service branches. Breaking down silos. Building operational cohesion. The reality? Friction. Competition. Men trying to prove their branch was superior. Women trying to prove they belonged at all. And instructors who sometimes forgot that integration meant cooperation, not domination. Elena fell in with the formation, middle of the pack, not front where leaders stood, not back where stragglers hid. Just another body in the crowd. Unremarkable. Forgettable. That's when she saw them. 3 Marines moving together. Not officially paired, but orbiting each other with the casual coordination of men who'd hunted as a pack before. Corporal Trent Holloway, 27, dark hair buzzed to stubble, jaw like a cinder block, eyes that tracked movement with predatory focus. Not looking at people, assessing them, categorizing, target or threat, weak or strong, worth engaging or worth dismissing. Lance Corporal Garrett Voss, 25, broad-shouldered, the kind of mass that came from years in the weight room and a metabolism that burned everything into muscle. He moved with deliberate heaviness, not clumsy, but like a man who knew his size was weapon enough and didn't need finesse. Private First Class Dylan Kane, 24, wiry, sharp-eyed, the calculating one. Where Holloway was direct and Voss was physical, Kane was tactical. He hung back, observed, waited for openings. The kind of fighter who struck from angles you didn't see coming. Together they were dangerous, not because of individual skill, though they had that, but could have climbed higher, could have outperformed half the formation without breaking a sweat. But that wasn't the mission. The mission was to look vulnerable, to seem like easy prey, to make predators believe they'd found what they were hunting for. She watched Holloway, Voss, and Kane. They excelled, pushed hard, made sure instructors saw their performance. But between sets, when instructors weren't watching, their attention drifted to the women in formation, assessing, categorizing. Private Kira Brennan, 22 years old, auburn hair pulled back in regulation bun, Oregon accent that came through even when she was gasping for air. She struggled with the rope climb, fell twice, got back up both times. Determination etched across her face. Holloway watched her fall, smiled. Not encouragement, amusement. Elena filed that away. Kira was already a victim, already targeted. The question was whether she'd reported it, whether she'd been dismissed, whether she was still here because she had nowhere else to go, or because she was tougher than they realized. After PT came weapons drills, M4 carbine disassembly and reassembly, blindfolded, timed, standard USMC qualification. Elena took her position at the weapons table, M4 laid out before her, components arranged in precise order. She'd done this thousands of times, could do it in her sleep, in combat, in pitch darkness with incoming fire. But today she made herself slower, fumbled slightly with the bolt carrier group, took 45 seconds when she could have done it in 18. Adequate, forgettable. 3 tables over, Kane finished in 22 seconds, called out his time, made sure everyone heard. Elena glanced his way, caught his eyes on her. Not her weapon, her. The way a hunter watches wounded prey. She looked away, let her shoulders curve slightly inward, a subtle body language shift that signaled uncertainty, vulnerability. Kane's smile widened. By midday, the pattern was established. Elena performed adequately, but not exceptionally, made small mistakes, asked occasional questions, positioned herself as competent, but not threatening. Just another integration officer trying to keep up with elite Marines. And Holloway, Voss, and Kane noticed, started positioning themselves near her during drills. Not obviously, just gravitational pull, orbiting closer, testing proximity. During the lunch break, Elena sat alone at a corner table in the chow hall, ate quickly, kept her head down, the universal signal of someone who didn't want attention. Holloway walked past her table, deliberately bumped it with his hip. Not hard, just enough to rattle her tray. He kept walking, didn't look back, didn't apologize. Elena said nothing, but her hand tightened slightly on her fork, just for a second, then relaxed. This was the game. Let them test, let them push, let them believe they controlled the interaction, and document every single contact for the moment when documentation would matter. The afternoon brought combatives training, MCMAP, Marine Corps Martial Arts Program, Level 3 techniques, grappling, joint manipulation, weapon retention, the kind of close-quarters combat where skill mattered more than strength and positioning trumped size. Elena was paired with Voss. He outweighed her by 80 pounds, stood 4 inches taller, and when the instructor called engage, he came at her with confidence bordering on arrogance. She let him take her down, not dramatically, just allowed his weight advantage to work. Ended up on her back with him in mount position. He applied pressure, not enough to hurt, just enough to dominate, to prove a point. The instructor called, "Stop." Voss stood, extended a hand to help her up. Elena stood without taking it. A subtle thing, but Voss noticed. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You okay?" False concern. The kind of question that wasn't really a question. "Fine," Elena said. Neutral tone. No challenge. No submission. Just acknowledgement. They reset. Went again. This time Elena defended better. Not winning, just making him work for it. Showing enough skill that he couldn't dismiss her entirely, but not so much that he'd recognize danger. After the third round, Voss was breathing hard. Elena's breathing remained steady. He noticed that too, and something shifted in his expression. Confusion. The first crack in certainty. The day wore on, drill after drill, exercise after exercise. And through it all, Holloway, Voss, and Kane kept circling closer, testing boundaries, pushing limits, seeing how far they could go before she reacted. But Elena gave them nothing. No anger, no fear, just neutral competence and carefully calibrated vulnerability. Because Colonel Aldridge had taught her something fundamental during her SEAL training, something that had saved her life in Kandahar and would save others here. Predators don't hunt what scares them. They hunt what looks like prey. So if you want to catch a predator, you have to make them believe they're hunting you. You have to let them commit. And then when they're fully exposed, when they've crossed the line and can't retreat, that's when you show them what you really are. By 1800 hours, Elena was exactly where she needed to be. Established as a presence, noticed but not remarkable, vulnerable but not helpless. The perfect target for men who'd learned that institutional protection meant they could hunt without consequence. She returned to barracks, showered, changed into fresh fatigues, then walked to the equipment bay on the eastern edge of the facility. The building was older, cinder block walls, narrow corridors, blind corners where observation was limited, and opportunities for isolation abundant. She walked through slowly, memorizing layout, exits, sight lines, camera positions, everything she'd need to know when the moment came. Because it would come. Maybe tomorrow, maybe 3 days from now, but it would come. Men like Holloway, Voss, and Kane always escalated, always pushed boundaries until something stopped them. And so far, nothing had. That was about to change. Elena found what she was looking for in the Eastern Wing. A corridor, 40 feet long, 8 feet wide, storage racks on both sides, and at the far end, 60 feet away, a single security camera. Old model, fixed position. The angle would show movement but not detail. Perfect for documentation without clear identification. She walked the corridor, counted steps, tested acoustics, identified choke points. This was her kill zone, where predators would commit, where she'd transform from prey to operator, where 4 days of patience would collapse into seconds of controlled violence. Elena returned to barracks as the sun set over California desert, lay in her bunk, stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she'd continue the operation, continue being prey, continue letting Holloway, Voss, and Kane believe they were in control. But when they finally crossed the line, and they would, Elena Thorne would show them something they'd never seen before. A Navy SEAL who'd spent 15 years learning exactly how to dismantle predators. She closed her eyes. Sleep came easily, because she knew something the predators didn't. Something Colonel Aldridge had taught her in Grenada stories and tunnel lessons and 15 years of wisdom accumulated through combat. Real warriors didn't hunt the weak. They protected them. And when predators emerged wearing the uniform, real warriors eliminated them. Not with rage, not with emotion, but with precision, skill, and the absolute certainty that justice, when delivered correctly, didn't need to announce itself. It just struck. Swift, silent, certain. And in 3 days, that's exactly what would happen. The corridor was waiting. The knife was waiting. The moment was waiting. And Commander Elena Thorne, she was ready. The second day began with dawn, breaking over California desert like a threat. Heat already pressing against the morning air by 0530, the kind of heat that made tempers short and judgment poor. Perfect conditions for men who'd learned to operate in the spaces where discipline grew slack. Elena woke before the alarm. Old habit. Combat deployments had taught her that the difference between alive and dead was often 30 seconds of preparation. She dressed in darkness, laced her boots tight, checked the micro recorder hidden in her left cargo pocket. The device was no larger than a button. Military-grade encryption. 8 hours of battery life. She'd activated it yesterday during first contact with Voss. Now it would run continuously until the mission ended, because everything mattered. Every word, every touch, every boundary crossed. When this was over, when MPS hauled these men away and lawyers started building cases, there couldn't be any ambiguity. No he said, she said. No room for institutional machinery to grind truth into acceptable fiction. The formation assembled at 0530, earlier than standard, a surprise PT test, the kind of evaluation designed to catch people unprepared, to see who maintained standards even when caught off guard. Elena fell in with the others, noted immediately that Holloway, Voss, and Kane had positioned themselves in the row directly behind her, close enough that she could feel their presence, close enough that every movement they made registered in her peripheral awareness. The test began. 3-mile run, full combat load, 45 pounds of gear, Molly vest, M4 replica, ammunition pouches, water. The kind of run that separated committed from casual, that revealed who maintained their conditioning and who'd let it slip. Elena kept pace with the middle of the pack, not leading, not struggling, just maintaining, her breathing steady, her stride economical, conserving energy the way Aldridge had taught her during their first desert training exercise back in 2013. Heat is a weapon, he'd said, standing in 110-degree Arizona sun without breaking a sweat. Use it against opponents who haven't learned to respect it. Let them burn themselves out while you stay controlled. Then strike when they're depleted. Behind her, she heard Voss's heavy breathing, not struggling, but working harder than necessary, pushing to maintain position near her rather than running his own race. Tactical error, letting target selection override operational efficiency. They were committed now, fully engaged, which meant the timeline was accelerating. The run ended. Elena finished in the middle third, adequate, unmemorable. She took water, rehydrated properly, watched as Holloway approached Private Kira Brennan, who'd finished near the back of the pack. Struggling today, Private? Holloway's voice carried false concern, the kind of question designed to humiliate while sounding helpful. Kira's face flushed. No, Corporal, just maintaining standards. Holloway stepped closer, invaded her space. That's a problem. Standards keep people alive. When you can't maintain them, you put everyone at risk. Kira said nothing, but her hands clenched at her sides. Elena saw something in her eyes that confirmed what Aldridge's files had suggested. This wasn't the first time Holloway had targeted her. This was a pattern, established, ongoing. Elena filed that observation, added it to the growing tactical picture, then turned away as if uninterested, as if she hadn't noticed, as if she wasn't cataloging every interaction for the moment when documentation would matter. The morning continued with weapons qualifications, M4 carbine, moving targets, stress fire exercises, the kind of shooting that required focus under pressure. Elena took her position on the line, loaded her magazine, 28 rounds, standard combat load. The weapon felt familiar in her hands. Extension of intention, tool calibrated to purpose. The targets appeared, pop-up silhouettes at varying distances. She engaged, controlled pairs, center mass, rhythm matching heartbeat, breathing synchronized with trigger press. She scored 41 out of 50. Qualified expert by Marine standards, but not exceptional, not memorable. Several shooters scored higher, including Kane, who made sure everyone knew his 47. But what Kane didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Elena had deliberately missed 9 shots, grouped them in a pattern that looked like wind drift and stress rather than intentional placement. Because exceptional shooting would have raised questions, would have made her remarkable, would have broken her cover as just another integration officer. And she needed them to keep underestimating her for 48 more hours. By midday, the harassment had escalated, subtle still, deniable, but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. During hand-to-hand combat drills, Voss was again paired with Elena. This time, his techniques were rougher. Pressure applied longer than necessary, positions held beyond the instructor's call to break. Not enough to cause injury, just enough to establish dominance. When they reset for the third round, Voss leaned close, his breath hot against her ear. "You're tougher than you look. I like that." The words weren't compliment, they were assessment, predator confirming prey characteristics before committing to the hunt. Elena said nothing, just reset her stance, let the drill continue. But she cataloged the comment, time-stamped it, added it to the pattern of escalation that would matter when she needed to justify what came next. Lunch came and went. Elena ate alone again. Holloway walked past her table again. This time he didn't just bump it, he stopped, looked down at her meal. "That all you're eating?" False concern again. The caring superior worried about a subordinate's welfare. "Need to maintain your strength out here. Never know when you'll need it." The threat was implicit, wrapped in words that could be defended as helpful, but the tone carried weight. Suggestion. Promise. Elena met his eyes, held them for exactly 2 seconds. Long enough to show she'd heard, not long enough to be challenging, then looked back down at her food. Holloway smiled, walked away. But as he passed, his hand brushed her shoulder. Brief contact, casual, deniable. But Elena felt it for what it was. Territory being marked, boundaries being tested. The predator announcing his intention before the strike. 40 hours left. The afternoon brought tactical movement exercises, squad-based, moving through simulated urban terrain, learning to coordinate across service branches, building the integration that justified this entire facility's existence. Elena was assigned to a mixed squad, 6 Marines, 4 sailors. She positioned herself in the middle of the formation, not point, not rear security, just another body in the tactical movement. Kane ended up next to her, close, closer than tactical spacing required. When they moved through a narrow corridor in the kill house, his body pressed against hers. Not accidental, deliberate. "Tight quarters," he muttered. "Got to get comfortable being close to your teammates." His hand brushed her hip, then her lower back. Brief contacts that could be explained as navigational adjustment, but weren't. Elena kept moving, didn't react, but she marked the escalation. Verbal to physical, testing to touching. They were accelerating faster than she'd projected, which meant the timeline might compress. She adjusted her operational planning accordingly. That evening, instead of returning directly to barracks, Elena walked the facility perimeter, familiarizing herself with layout, memorizing routes, identifying choke points, everything she'd need when documentation phase transitioned to intervention phase. She passed the equipment bay, the building where the pattern had been established, where men had learned they could operate with impunity as long as they avoided cameras and witnesses. Elena studied the approaches, the blind corridor on the eastern side, the storage area with limited visibility, the perfect trap for predators who'd learned to avoid observation. Tomorrow or the next day, she'd engineer a situation, create opportunity, make herself available in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. And when they took that opportunity, when they crossed from harassment to assault, she'd document it, then dismantle it, then ensure it never happened again. But tonight she was still prey, still vulnerable, still letting them believe they controlled this hunt. She returned to barracks, lay in her bunk, But sleep didn't come immediately because her mind was running through scenarios, calculating probabilities, wargaming responses. Three opponents, coordinated, operating on their ground with institutional protection and established patterns. Under normal circumstances, that would be overwhelming odds. But these weren't normal circumstances, because they didn't know they were fighting. They thought they were hunting, thought their target was isolated and vulnerable and powerless. They were wrong on all three counts. Elena finally slept, deep, dreamless, the sleep of someone who knew exactly what was coming and had prepared for every variation. Day 3 dawned hotter, 95 degrees by 0700, the kind of heat that made everything harder, that eroded patience and judgment, that created the conditions where men who'd been circling finally decided to strike. Morning PT was brutal. High-intensity circuits, burpees, mountain climbers, rope climbs, sandbag carries, the kind of workout designed to break people down. Holloway positioned himself next to Elena during the rope climb, watched as she ascended, his eyes tracking her movement with predatory focus. When she descended, he was waiting at the bottom. "Good form," he said, then added, "for someone your size." The qualifier was deliberate, reminder of physical disparity, establishment of hierarchy. Elena nodded, said nothing, moved to the next station. But she noted the shift. Yesterday had been testing. Today was decision. They'd moved from assessment to commitment, which meant the window was closing. The strike would come soon. Maybe today, probably tomorrow. She needed to control the terrain. During the mid-morning break, Elena made her first deliberate move. She approached the equipment bay alone, visibly alone, walking with purpose but no apparent awareness of vulnerability. Inside the bay, she browsed through gear, checking inventory, examining equipment, playing the role of integration officer doing her job. She felt them before she saw them. Holloway, Voss, Kane, entering the bay separately but converging. Not surrounding her yet, just positioning, creating opportunity. Elena's heart rate didn't change. Her breathing remained steady. She continued examining equipment, letting them commit, letting them believe this was happenstance rather than engineering. They moved closer, started a conversation among themselves, loud enough for her to hear, talking about the morning's PT, about weakness, about standards, about people who couldn't maintain them. The words were aimed at her without being directed to her. Psychological pressure. Establishing dominance through proximity and implication. Elena finished her inventory check, turned to leave, found her path partially blocked, not completely, just enough to make her navigate around them, to force close contact. She moved, chose her angle carefully, and as she passed, Voss's shoulder bumped hers, harder than necessary. Physical escalation disguised as crowded navigation. "Careful," he said, false apology, "tight spaces." Elena said nothing, just kept walking, left the equipment bay, returned to the training yard. But she'd accomplished her objective, established pattern, created opportunity. Now they knew she went to the equipment bay alone, knew she was accessible, knew she was vulnerable. Tomorrow she'd do it again, and tomorrow they'd be ready. They'd corner her properly, in the blind corridor where no cameras reached, where no witnesses would see, and then she'd show them what Tier 1 meant. The afternoon brought more tactical exercises, movement under fire, stress inoculation, learning to function when chaos erupted and precision became survival. During one exercise, Kane ended up behind Elena in a stacked entry formation, his hands on her hips, ostensibly for tactical communication, actually for dominance, for continued boundary violation. "Stay tight," he muttered. "Follow my lead." His grip tightened, fingers digging in, pressure applied, message sent. Elena didn't pull away, didn't protest, just accepted the contact. Because protest would have been resistance, and resistance would have been acknowledgement. And acknowledgement would have validated their behavior as meaningful rather than pathetic. She waited until the exercise completed, then stepped away, casual, unremarkable, as if the contact hadn't registered. But it had. She documented it mentally: time, location, witnesses, everything she'd need when the formal report was filed. After intervention. After they were on the ground wondering what the hell just happened. That evening, Elena made contact with Aldridge. Encrypted sat phone. Short conversation. Update only. Timeline accelerating, she said. Estimate 24 to 36 hours before they commit fully. Aldridge's voice carried weight, concern without doubt, trust earned over 15 years. Are you positioned? Equipment bay, Eastern Corridor. Tomorrow around 1400 hours. I'll engineer isolation. Witnesses? I'll ensure response time allows for observation before intervention. Silence. Then Aldridge spoke carefully. Be certain, Elena. Once you move, there's no walking it back. I'm certain. They've crossed every line except the final one. Tomorrow they will. And when they do, I'll document it, then end it. Copy. I'll brief Admiral Sterling. He'll have MPS staged but not visible. You'll have response within 60 seconds. I won't need 60. I'll need 15. 60 is for cleanup. She heard Aldridge smile through the encrypted line. That's my student. The call ended. Elena secured the phone, lay back in her bunk, ran through the scenarios one more time. 3 opponents, coordinated but not trained in actual combat, confident but not competent, predators but not warriors, against a Tier 1 SEAL operator who'd spent 15 years learning exactly how to dismantle opponents efficiently and without wasted motion, who'd been trained by a man who'd survived Grenada tunnels and Operation Urgent Fury, who'd internalized lessons paid for in blood across 41 years of service. The fight wouldn't be fair, but fairness wasn't the objective. Justice was, and justice delivered properly was swift and surgical and absolutely final. Tomorrow would bring that justice. Tomorrow would balance the scales that had been tipped in favor of predators for too long. Tomorrow would teach 3 men that uniform didn't grant immunity, and institutional protection eventually met individual accountability. Tomorrow, Elena Thorne would stop being prey and remind everyone what real operators look like. But tonight she slept, because tomorrow required clarity, focus, the kind of precision that only came from being fully rested and absolutely certain. And Elena was certain, had been certain since Aldridge first briefed her, had been certain since she read the files, had been certain since she felt Voss's hands on her hips and Kane's breath on her neck, and Holloway's eyes tracking her like wounded game. Certain that predators, when properly confronted, weren't actually dangerous. They were just cowards who'd learned to operate in the absence of accountability. Tomorrow, accountability arrived. Wearing fatigues and numbered armband 177 in 15 years of SEAL training and 41 years of institutional wisdom, passed down from a man who understood that real warriors protected rather than prayed. Tomorrow the knife would cut her shirt, and then the knife would hit the floor. And then 3 predators would learn what happened when prey turned out to be predator, when silence turned out to be strategy, when patience turned out to be weapon. Tomorrow would be seconds long, but those seconds would reshape everything that came after. Day 4 came like judgment, the heat pressing down even before sunrise, sky the color of old bruises, air thick enough to taste, the kind of morning that felt like something was about to break. Elena woke at 0500, earlier than necessary, but she needed time. Time to center herself, to run through scenarios one final time, to ensure every variable was accounted for and every response was calibrated. She dressed slowly, standard fatigues, boots laced tight, hair secured, everything regulation, everything squared away. Because when this was over, When MPs arrived and reports were filed and admirals asked questions, there couldn't be any detail that suggested anything except professional conduct right up until the moment self-defense became necessary. Under her pillow, a small envelope. She'd found it slipped under her door during the night. Plain paper, no return address. Inside, a USB drive and a handwritten note. The note was brief. I couldn't fight when it happened, but I kept everything. Photos, audio recordings, names of 4 other women at different bases where he served. This is what you need to finish it. Make sure he never does this again. KB. Kira Brennan, private, 22 years old. The woman who'd been broken but had never stopped documenting, had never stopped believing that someday someone would listen. Elena inserted the USB into her encrypted laptop. The files loaded, 28 years of evidence, audio recordings of cross-coaching predators, photos of injuries, statements from victims across 4 bases, and in one folder, recordings from peer counseling sessions. Cross's voice, calm and reasonable, explaining to frightened women why their complaints wouldn't go anywhere, why it was better to withdraw, why continuing would only damage their careers. Listen carefully, Cross's voice said through the speakers. Peer counseling is your shield. She files formal complaint. I route through review process. That means I sit on it 30 days. Then I call you both in. You apologize. She withdraws. Paperwork disappears. Trust the system. I've done this for 28 years. Elena stopped the recording, her jaw tight, her hands steady. 28 years. Quantico to here. Lieutenant Diana Ashford to Kira Brennan, to God knows how many others who never reported, never documented, just endured and eventually broke. That ended today. She encrypted the USB, backed it up to 3 separate secure servers, then placed the original in her cargo pocket next to the micro recorder. Everything she'd need to dismantle not just 3 predators, but the entire system that had protected them. Morning formation was tense, the heat already oppressive, tempers short, discipline fraying at the edges. Perfect conditions. Holloway, Voss, and Kane positioned themselves near Elena during PT. Closer than yesterday, almost crowding, the circle tightening, predators moving from assessment to action. During the cool-down stretch, Kane moved next to her, close enough that his shoulder touched hers. You going to the equipment bay later? The question was casual. Too casual. Probably, Elena said. Neutral, unremarkable. Need to check some inventory. We'll be there around 1400, doing some gear maintenance. Not an offer, an announcement. Territory being claimed. Elena nodded, said nothing more. But inside, the tactical clock started running. 1400 hours. Equipment bay. Eastern corridor. Exactly as projected. Everything was in position. Now she just had to wait. The morning dragged. Training exercises. Drills. The routine that had become familiar over 4 days. But underneath the routine, tension building. The sense of something imminent. At 13:30 hours, Elena walked to the equipment bay, earlier than she'd indicated, deliberate choice. Let them find her. Let them think this was opportunity rather than trap. She moved through the main storage area, past rows of gear, combat packs, helmets, body armor, the implements of military function arranged in precise order. She moved toward the eastern corridor, the narrow passage between equipment racks where visibility was limited and cameras couldn't reach, the blind spot, the killing floor, the place where patterns had been established and victims had been broken. Not today. Today that pattern ended. Elena positioned herself halfway down the corridor, examining a rack of training equipment, back partially turned, vulnerable, available, perfect prey. She heard them before she saw them. Boots on concrete, 3 sets, moving with coordinated purpose, not rushing, just converging. Predators who'd done this before, who knew the timing, who understood how to isolate targets. They entered the corridor, spread out, blocking exits, Holloway in front, Voss to the left, Kane behind. Triangle formation. Tactical positioning that would have been impressive if it wasn't being used for harassment. "Didn't expect to see you here," Holloway said. False surprise. "Thought you'd be at afternoon drills." "Inventory check," Elena said. Kept her voice neutral. Didn't turn fully. Didn't acknowledge the positioning. "We can help with that," Voss said, moving closer. "Teamwork, right? Integration." They were escalating faster than previous days. Confidence building. Certainty settling. They decided this was the moment. This was where they'd push beyond harassment into assault. Where they'd teach her that silence meant submission, and isolation meant vulnerability, and female meant target. They were about to learn differently. "I'm fine," Elena said, still neutral, still calm. "Almost done." "Don't think you are," Kane said. He'd moved behind her, close, too close. "Think you need some correction. Form adjustment. You've been doing some things wrong out there." His hand reached for her shoulder, not gentle, claiming ownership. Elena stepped away, smooth motion, not panicked, just creating distance. "I don't need adjustment." "Yeah, you do." Holloway moved closer, the triangle tightening. "See, we've been watching you. 4 days. You're sloppy, weak, and that's dangerous. Puts everyone at risk when you can't maintain standards." "My standards are fine." "No," Voss said, moving into her space. "They're not, and we're going to show you why." His hands shot out, grabbed her uniform shirt at the collar. Not violent yet, but possessive, controlling. The physical line crossed. "Let go," Elena said. Her voice remained calm, but something had shifted in her tone. Warning delivered. Voss smiled. "Or what?" Kane produced a training knife. Rubberized blade, non-lethal, but the message was clear. This was demonstration, humiliation, the same pattern that had worked on Kira Brennan and 3 other women before them. "Here's what's going to happen," Holloway said. His voice carried absolute certainty, the confidence of a predator who'd never been stopped. "We're going to teach you about standards, about what happens when you don't meet them, about knowing your place." Kane stepped closer, the knife in his hand, not threatening with it yet, just holding it, showing it, psychological pressure before physical assault. "Your shirt's too tight," Kane said. "Doesn't meet regulation. Let's fix that." The knife moved, slow, deliberate, pressed against the fabric of her uniform shirt. Not cutting yet, just touching, just demonstrating control. "Step back," Elena said, still calm, still controlled. Final warning. "Or what?" Holloway asked, mocking. "You going to report us?" "Good luck with that. We know how this works. No witnesses, no cameras, just your word against ours. And we're good Marines. You're just another integration officer who couldn't handle the pressure." The knife bit. Fabric parted. A clean slice from collarbone downward. Not deep, not wounding, just cutting, exposing, humiliating. They were smiling, all 3, confident, certain. Predators who'd learned that isolation plus intimidation plus institutional protection equaled immunity. They'd learned wrong. The knife moved for a second cut, Kane's hand steady, his face showing satisfaction. The pleasure of dominance, of power without consequence. That's when footsteps echoed, heavy, authoritative. Major Vincent Cross rounded the corner. 53 years old, silver hair, hard eyes. The architect of 28 years of institutional rot. "What the hell is going on here?" Holloway froze, the smile vanishing. "Sir, just some corrective." "Officer," Cross said, turning to Elena, his voice cold, dismissive. "You need to understand how things work here. When Marines are providing guidance." Elena's eyes met his. Recognition flashed across Cross's face. Something like comprehension, something like fear, because he'd seen that look before, 28 years ago, in Lieutenant Diana Ashford's eyes, right before he destroyed her career. But this time was different. This time the woman staring back at him wasn't afraid. She was waiting. Elena moved, and everything changed. 4.7 seconds. That's all it took. Kane's knife hit the concrete before he understood what happened. Then he followed it. Nerve strike, palm strike, hip throw, professional, precise, devastating, zero point 0.0 to 0.3 seconds. Elena's left hand struck the radial nerve on Kane's wrist, exactly 2 inches distal to the wrist joint, medial side. 15 pounds of pressure at precise angle. Involuntary finger extension. The knife dropped, rotated in air, fluorescent light catching steel. 0.3 to 1.1 seconds. Right palm strike to Kane's solar plexus. Xiphoid process. 45-degree upward angle. Diaphragm spasm. Immediate respiratory distress. Kane doubled over. Elena's hip connected. Judo principle, using his forward momentum. 180 pounds versus 190. Physics over strength. Kane, airborne. 0.4 seconds. Lands flat back. Elena guided the fall trajectory. His head didn't impact concrete. Controlled violence. Voss charged next. 240 pounds of muscle. Full speed. Linebacker mentality. 1.1 to 2.8 seconds. Elena didn't retreat. Redirected using Aikido principle. Arm wrap around neck. Not full choke. Controlled pressure on carotid. Using his momentum for rotation. Simultaneous action. Elbow hyperextension. Audible pop. Shoulder ligament stressed but not torn. Surgical precision. Voss screamed, dropped to knees in 1.7 seconds. Holloway went for the fallen knife. Predictable. 2.8 to 4.4 seconds. Elena's boot pinned his hand. 50 pounds of pressure. No bone break. Leg sweep. Weight transfer. Mount position in 0.8 seconds. Knee on chest. Sternum pressure point. Breathing restricted but not stopped. Face to face, 8 inches. Done? Elena asked. Breathing steady, not even elevated. Holloway's eyes showed comprehension, finally understanding what they'd tried to hunt. Yeah, he gasped. We're done. Good. 4.4 to 4.7 seconds. Cross lunged forward. You assaulted my Marines. Elena spun. The Granada K-bar appeared in her hand, drawn from concealed belt sheath in 0.2 seconds. 7-inch blade, 1,095 carbon steel, worn leather grip. The knife Aldridge had carried through Granada tunnels in 1983. Blade stopped 2 inches from Cross's throat. Absolute control. Freeze frame. Elena's voice, deadly calm. Commander Elena Thorne, SEAL Team 6, SOCOM Investigative Authority. Major Cross, you've been protecting predators for 28 years. That ends now. Cross's face went pale. You can't. I can, Elena said. And I did. And every second of the last 4 days is documented. Audio, video, witness testimony, including you attempting to intimidate me 30 seconds ago. Aldridge's voice crackled through Elena's earpiece. High-definition camera behind the ventilation grate captured everything. 4K footage, including Cross entering and attempting to cover for his Marines. We have it all, Commander. Footsteps echoed. Multiple sets. Moving fast. Gunnery Sergeant Cole Mathis led the way. 2 corporals behind him. Admiral Robert Sterling 30 seconds behind them. They rounded the corner, saw 3 Marines on the ground, one gasping, one cradling his shoulder, one staring at the ceiling like he'd seen God and learned God didn't like him, one major frozen with a blade near his throat, and one woman standing in the middle, torn shirt held together with one hand, breathing steady, expression neutral. Mathis's hand moved toward his sidearm, reflex, then stopped, because something in the scene didn't match expectations. The woman wasn't panicked, wasn't scared, wasn't victim. She was calm, collected, standing like someone who just completed a training exercise rather than survived assault. "Ma'am," Mathis said, then stopped, unsure how to proceed. Elena reached into her cargo pocket, produced the black ID wallet, extended it without word, let the credentials speak. Mathis opened it. His face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, something approaching awe. "Commander Elena Thorne," he read aloud, "Naval Special Warfare Command, SEAL Team 6, Tier 1 clearance, SOCOM Investigative Authority." The corridor went silent. Even Voss's gasping stopped. Because those words, Tier 1, SOCOM, SEAL, they carried weight. They meant something. They meant the woman they'd cornered wasn't prey. She was predator, had always been predator, had just been patient enough to let them commit before demonstrating exactly what she was. Admiral Sterling arrived, took in the scene. His face hardened. "Sergeant, secure these 4. Medical isolation, no communication. I want statements from everyone in this facility who had contact with them over the past 4 days." "Yes, sir." Sterling turned to Elena. His voice carried respect now. Recognition. "Commander Thorne, are you injured?" "No, sir." "Do you require medical attention?" "No, sir." "Do you wish to file charges?" Elena looked down at Holloway, at Voss, at Kane, at Cross. 4 predators who'd learned that institutional protection wasn't absolute, that eventually accountability arrived. "I don't file charges, Admiral. I make recommendations. And I recommend you call Colonel James Aldridge at the Pentagon immediately. Because what happened here today isn't an isolated incident. It's the visible part of systematic failure. And SOCOM needs full debrief." Sterling nodded. "Sergeant, get these 4 out of here. Commander, with me." As MPs moved to secure the 4 men, Holloway looked up at Elena, his face carrying questions he couldn't articulate. How? Why? What just happened? Elena met his eyes, held them. When she spoke, her voice carried something beyond calm, carried certainty, authority, the weight of 15 years proving herself, and 41 years of institutional wisdom passed down from a man who taught her that real warriors protected rather than preyed. "You made 3 mistakes," she said quietly. "First, you assumed silence meant weakness. Second, you assumed isolation meant vulnerability. Third, you assumed that cutting a woman's uniform meant you were in control." She paused. "You were wrong on all 3 counts. And now you'll have the rest of your very short military careers to think about why." She turned, walked toward the exit, left them on the ground with MPs, in comprehension, and the slow realization that everything they believed about power and protection and immunity had been illusion. That real operators didn't announce themselves, they just operated. And when predators emerged, real operators eliminated them, not with rage, not with emotion, with precision, skill. Justice delivered so efficiently, it looked effortless. Behind her, the corridor emptied. MPs hauling away 4 careers that had just ended. Sterling already on his phone with Aldridge. Mathis securing the scene. Evidence being documented. Patterns being revealed. The machinery of institutional accountability finally engaging. Because one operator had been patient enough to let predators commit before demonstrating exactly what Tier 1 meant. Elena walked into California heat, torn shirt, steady breathing, mission complete. Phase 1 finished. Now came Phase 2, the investigation, the documentation, the systematic reform that would ensure Kira Brennan's story didn't repeat. She reached for her sat phone, encrypted line. Aldridge answered on first ring. "It's done," she said simply. "Status, 4 subjects secured, 0 injuries except pride, evidence documented, admiral engaged, full investigation timeline accelerated but clean. Silence. Then Aldridge's voice, carrying something she rarely heard from him. Pride. That's my student. Well done, Commander, well done. The call ended. Elena stood in desert sun, felt heat pressing down, felt torn fabric against her skin, felt satisfaction of justice delivered and mission accomplished and predators stopped. But mostly she felt certainty that this was what she'd trained for, what 15 years had built toward, what Aldridge's 41 years of wisdom had prepared her to execute. Real warriors protected, and today she'd protected Kira Brennan and prevented dozens more. Had proven that institutional rot, when properly confronted, wasn't invincible. That predators, when properly engaged, were just cowards. And that silence, when deployed strategically, was the most devastating weapon of all. Phase 1 complete, Phase 2 beginning. And somewhere in a Pentagon basement office, Colonel James Aldridge smiled, because his student had just reminded the entire military establishment what real operators look like. They looked like justice. And justice had just arrived in California desert. 4.7 seconds at a time. 72 hours after the corridor incident, the investigation had transformed from documentation to prosecution. General Sarah Hawthorne arrived at California Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility with a SOCOM team of 12 investigators, military lawyers, forensic analysts, victim advocates. The machinery of military justice, when properly engaged, moved with precision that rivaled any SEAL operation. 58 years old, 3 stars, face that had seen Desert Storm and Afghanistan, and 28 years of fighting institutional battles that didn't involve bullets. She reviewed Elena's evidence package in silence, 4 hours straight in a secure briefing room. When she finally spoke, her voice carried weight that went beyond rank. "This is worse than we projected." Elena stood at attention. "Yes, ma'am. Cross has been operating like this since 1996. 28 years. Documentation suggests minimum 16 victims across 4 bases. Actual number probably triple that. Most never reported. Those who did were dismissed. And Colonel Aldridge recommended discharge in 1996. Yes, ma'am. Command overruled. Political considerations. Cross had connections. Victim was deemed unreliable witness. Hawthorne looked at Aldridge, who'd arrived with her from the Pentagon. "That's why you've been building this case for 3 months. Personal stake." "Professional stake," Aldridge corrected. His voice carried 41 years of authority. "I failed in 1996. Let politics override justice. Let a predator continue operating because removing him was inconvenient. 28 years later, I'm not failing again." "You won't have to," Hawthorne said. "We have enough here to proceed with full court-martial. Cross, Holloway, Voss, Kane. All 4. Charges ranging from assault to systematic abuse of authority to obstruction of justice." "Timeline?" Elena asked. "Formal charges within 48 hours. Arrest and confinement within 72. Court-martial proceedings begin within 30 days. This moves fast. No delays. No political interference." She paused, looked directly at Elena. "And when it's over, we implement new protocols. Base-wide, then service-wide. This facility becomes pilot program for harassment prevention and response. What failed here gets fixed, and what gets fixed here gets implemented everywhere." "What about the victims?" Elena asked. "Full support, counseling, career assistance. Those who transferred out get opportunity to return if they choose. Those who were medically discharged get records reviewed and honorable status restored where appropriate. We don't just punish perpetrators, we restore victims. That's complete justice." Elena felt something unknot in her chest. Tension she'd carried for 4 days. Longer. 15 years since she was 18, and filed complaint and learned that truth didn't always matter more than convenience. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me, Commander. You built this. You documented, you risked, you executed. All I'm doing is ensuring institutional machinery does what it should have done 16 months ago, 28 years ago. Every time someone brave enough to speak truth got dismissed instead of heard. An hour later, a corporal escorted Private Kira Brennan into the conference room. 22 years old, auburn hair still regulation tight, but her eyes carried something different now. Not fear, hope mixed with uncertainty. The look of someone who'd been told she was wrong so many times she'd started believing it, but who'd just seen 3 predators hauled away by MPs. Ma'am, Kira said hesitantly, people are saying. She stopped, started again. Did you really? Are you really a SEAL? I am, Elena said. And those 3, Holloway, Voss, and Kane, they assaulted me. Same pattern they used on you 6 months ago. I documented it, then I stopped it. And now they're in custody pending SOCOM investigation. Kira's eyes went wet. Not crying, just relief so overwhelming it had to go somewhere. I tried to report it. What Holloway did, I filed complaint with Major Cross. He said I was mistaken, that Holloway was just doing his job, that I needed to be less sensitive if I wanted to succeed in military environment. She looked down at her hands. He made me feel like I was the problem, like I was weak, like I didn't belong here. You weren't mistaken, Elena said firmly. You weren't oversensitive. You were victimized. And the man who dismissed you is being investigated for systematic protection of predators spanning 28 years. She leaned forward. Because you were right, Kira. You were right, and he was wrong. And you're going to get to tell your story to people who will believe you. Kira sat down, hands shaking slightly. What if they don't believe me? What if... They will, Elena interrupted. Because this time we have more than your word. We have pattern. We have documentation. We have multiple victims. And we have evidence that proves Cross has been doing this for 28 years. Your testimony is an isolated complaint that can be dismissed. It's part of a comprehensive case that proves institutional failure. Aldridge spoke from his position near the wall. Private Brennan, in my 41 years of service, I've learned something. The bravest warriors aren't those who charge enemy lines. They're those who speak truth when everyone says, shut up. He paused. You spoke truth. That took more courage than anything I did in Grenada or Operation Urgent Fury. And now that courage is going to help ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Kira's voice was stronger now. I want to testify, whatever you need. I want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. When Kira left, Elena set up the video call with Sergeant Rachel Donovan. The connection took a moment to establish. Then a woman's face appeared on screen. 28 years old, dark hair, brown eyes that had seen too much, too young. Commander Thorne. Rachel's voice was uncertain, fragile. Sergeant Donovan, thank you for keeping evidence for 16 months when you had every reason to destroy it. Rachel's face showed surprise mixed with relief. You know it was me? I sent the USB anonymously because I didn't know if... We know, Elena confirmed, and it's exactly what we needed. 28 years of Cross's operation, audio of him coaching predators. Your documentation is going to dismantle an entire system. Rachel's eyes filled. Is it over? Did you stop them? Holloway, Voss, and Kane are in custody. Cross is under investigation. And General Hawthorne is leading formal SOCOM inquiry. But we need your testimony, on record, everything that happened 16 months ago, everything Cross said during peer counseling, everything you documented. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. I thought I was weak, she said finally. Thought I couldn't handle military culture, that I was the problem, and I carried that shame for 16 months. Until today, until I learned that it wasn't me, It was them. You weren't weak, Elena said. You were outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and betrayed by institutional structure that should have protected you. But your courage, keeping evidence for 16 months, hoping someone would listen, that's what breaks the system. Your testimony ensures justice finally happens. Aldridge leaned into frame. Sergeant Donovan, I'm Colonel James Aldridge. I investigated Cross in 1996 when he was accused at Quantico. I recommended discharge. Command overruled me, and I've carried the guilt of that failure for 28 years. His voice softened. If I had stopped him then, you would never have suffered. I can't change that, but I can promise you that this time he doesn't get protected. This time justice happens, and your courage made that possible. Rachel wiped her eyes. Whatever you need, I'm ready. The next 36 hours blurred together. Interviews, documentation, file reviews, evidence compilation. Elena moved through it with methodical precision. Each victim's story documented, each incident cataloged, each piece of evidence cross-referenced and verified. Under Hawthorne's direction, formal charges were filed within 48 hours. Cross, Holloway, Voss, and Kane were confined to military detention pending court-martial. The timeline was aggressive. Proceedings would begin in 30 days. No delays, no political interference. 28 days later, the court-martial proceedings concluded. Military courtroom. Packed gallery. Every seat filled with personnel who'd heard whispers, seen patterns, but never quite understood the scope until evidence was laid bare. The prosecution's case was devastating in its simplicity. Video showing 4.7 seconds of Elena dismantling 3 attackers. Audio documentation spanning 4 days. USB evidence covering 28 years. And testimony from 7 women who'd been told their truth didn't matter. Now, in military courtroom under oath, their truth was becoming record. The defense tried every angle. Entrapment, maintaining standards, misunderstanding military culture. Cross's lawyer painted him as dedicated officer protecting institutional integrity. Major Cross has served this nation for 28 years. Exemplary record, multiple commendations. He created the peer counseling system to resolve conflicts efficiently, to protect careers, to maintain unit cohesion. But when Elena took the stand, she destroyed every argument with precision that matched her combat technique. Commander Thorne, the defense attorney said, you're highly trained Tier 1 SEAL operator. These were ordinary Marines. Isn't that unfair advantage? Elena looked directly at the jury. Ordinary Marines don't cut women's uniforms with knives. Predators do. My training is why I'm testifying instead of being another dismissed complaint. If protecting myself makes this unfair, then yes, it's unfair to every woman before me who couldn't defend herself. That's exactly why systematic reform is necessary. The courtroom went silent. The prosecution played audio, Cross's own voice, calm, methodical, explaining his 28-year system in detail. The courtroom listened in silence as he described exactly how to make complaints disappear. His own words, his own confession. When it ended, several jury members were visibly shaken. Rachel testified, details of her assault, Cross's peer counseling session. The pressure applied until she requested medical discharge. Kiera testified, attempted assault before Elena arrived, Cross's dismissal, being told she was too sensitive for military service. Diana Ashford testified via video from Montana, 52 years old now, speaking about 1996, about filing complaint, about Aldridge's investigation, about command overruling, about being forced into retirement at 24. Cross took the stand, maintained innocence, claimed he was protecting institutional integrity. Elena's attorney approached. Major Cross, how many women filed complaints that you processed as executive officer in the last 5 years? 7 formal complaints. How many resulted in disciplinary action against the accused? Silence. How many, Major? Peer counseling resolved. How many resulted in disciplinary action? Yes or no? Cross's face tightened. Zero. Zero formal investigations. Zero disciplinary actions. 7 complaints. 7 dismissed or withdrawn. Is that correct? The system was designed to no further questions. The verdicts came 3 days later. The courtroom packed again. Victims in the front row. Kiera, Rachel, Diana, 4 others, all present, all watching. The military judge entered. Everyone stood. The charges were read. Assault, systematic abuse of authority, obstruction of justice, conspiracy. For Corporal Trent Holloway, guilty on all counts. Dishonorable discharge, 7 years military prison, lifetime prohibition from federal employment. For Lance Corporal Garrett Voss, guilty on all counts. Dishonorable discharge, 6 years military prison, lifetime prohibition from federal employment. For Private First Class Dylan Kane, guilty on all counts. Dishonorable discharge, 5 years military prison, lifetime prohibition from federal employment. For Major Vincent Cross, guilty on all counts. Dishonorable discharge, 15 years federal prison. Total forfeiture of pension and benefits. Lifetime prohibition from federal employment. Cross's face went blank. 28 years of certainty collapsing in seconds. In the gallery, Rachel Donovan collapsed into sobs. Kira Brennan stood, shoulders straight, tears streaming but standing. Diana Ashford, watching via video feed, closed her eyes. 28 years of waiting, 28 years of shame that was never hers to carry, finally over. Admiral Sterling stood to make a statement. Today we don't just punish perpetrators, we acknowledge systematic failure. Starting immediately, California Joint Warfare Conditioning Facility implements new protocols. Mandatory independent reporting, zero tolerance enforcement, victim support programs. These protocols will become model for entire Department of Defense. He paused. To every service member who spoke truth and wasn't heard, we failed you. That failure ends today. 3 weeks after the verdicts, Elena stood in dress blues at Naval Yard, San Diego. Aldridge's retirement ceremony. 180 personnel assembled. Admiral Sterling presiding, General Hawthorne present. The speeches were standard at first. Honorable service, dedication, sacrifice. 41 years protecting the nation. But when Aldridge spoke, he went a different direction. 41 years, he said. Grenada to Afghanistan. I've trained thousands, led hundreds, and people ask what I'm most proud of. He paused, looked directly at Elena. The proudest moment isn't mine. It's watching Commander Thorne finish what I couldn't start. One operator, 4.7 seconds, 28 years of rot dismantled. His voice softened. That's not redemption, that's legacy. After the ceremony, in a private moment away from the crowd, Aldridge gave Elena his Grenada knife. She already carried it, had carried it through the operation. But this was formal transfer, legacy passing. This knife saved me 6 times, he said quietly. Central America, Grenada, Operation Urgent Fury. It taught me everything about waiting for the exact right moment, about letting enemy commit before striking, about patience as weapon. He placed it in her hands. Now it's yours, not just as tool, as reminder. Real warriors protect those who can't protect themselves. And real legacy isn't what you accomplish. It's who carries your lessons forward and how they use them to change the world. Elena took the blade, felt the weight, the history. 41 years of service compressed into steel and leather. I wouldn't be here without you. 2009, when I filed complaint and was dismissed. You believed me, taught me I wasn't powerless, gave me the tools to become this. And now you've taught others the same lesson, Aldridge said. That's how legacy works. I taught you. You'll teach next generation. And 40 years from now, someone you train will do something that makes you proud. The way you've made me proud. He smiled. The legacy continues, one warrior at a time. 6 months later, Coronado Naval Base, SEAL training facility. California sun beating down on obstacle courses and confidence courses and everything designed to break people who weren't ready. Commander Elena Thorne stood before 30 female candidates, lead instructor for the integrated SEAL training program, teaching the next generation, passing forward what Aldridge had given her. In the front row, struggling but determined, was Private Kira Brennan. 6 months ago, a victim, broken by predators and institutional betrayal. Today, a SEAL candidate, leading her class. Tomorrow, an operator. The transformation Elena had fought for. The reason 4.7 seconds mattered. Obstacle course, Elena called out. Move! The candidates ran. Kira in front, setting pace, calling encouragement to those behind her. She hit the rope climb, started ascending, fell at 15 feet, got back up, tried again. Elena watched, waited until the drill completed, then pulled Kira aside. Private Brennan, 6 months ago you filed complaint against harassment. We're told you were too sensitive, that you didn't belong. But you were right. And now you're here proving every person who doubted you was wrong. Kira's face showed uncertainty. What if I'm not strong enough, ma'am? Elena met her eyes. You filed complaint when easier to stay silent. You testified when easier to hide. You kept evidence for 6 months, hoping someone would listen. You're already stronger than you know. Now you learn to translate courage into capability. That evening, during knife combat training, Elena demonstrated with the Grenada K-bar. This blade survived Grenada, 1983, she told the candidates, carried by Colonel James Aldridge through Operation Urgent Fury. He taught me something fundamental. Predators hunt what looks weak. Warriors protect what looks vulnerable. The difference is patience. She held the blade up, light catching the inscription, patience kills arrogance. When you wait for exact right moment, you control everything. Outcome, timing, justice. That's what this knife represents. Not violence, control. Not aggression, protection. She looked at the 30 women standing before her. You're here because someone told you that you didn't belong, that women can't meet the standard, that military service isn't for you. Every single one of you proved them wrong just by showing up. She paused. Now you prove it again, every day, every drill, every obstacle. Not because you have to prove anything to them, but because you're becoming the warriors this nation needs. The ones who protect rather than prey. The ones who stand up when everyone says sit down. The ones who speak truth when everyone says stay silent. After training, Elena's phone buzzed with messages. From General Hawthorne, Fort Bragg situation resolved. 2 officers discharged. Victim reinstated with honors. Your protocol's working. 8 more bases implementing similar programs. The change is spreading. Well done, Commander. From Kira, sent during evening break. Ma'am, I passed Phase 1 selection, top of class. They're saying I might be first female SEAL from Oregon. Thank you for showing me what strong really means. From Rachel Donovan. Commander, they reinstated me today. Full rank, honorable status, back pay. But more than that, they believe me. Finally, after 16 months, thank you for making that possible. From Diana Ashford. Elena, I'm returning to service. Consultant role for Victim Advocacy Program. 28 years I waited. 28 years I thought I was alone. Now I'm part of solution. You made that possible. With gratitude, always, Diana. Elena stood alone on Coronado Beach as sun set over Pacific, the Grenada knife in her hand, feeling the weight, the history. She thought about Aldridge, about his 41 years building toward this moment, about how failure in 1996 had driven him to ensure success in 2024. She thought about Diana, Kira, Rachel, every woman who'd been dismissed and silenced and told their truth didn't matter. Their truth mattered now. Because one operator had been patient enough to document it, precise enough to prove it, certain enough to execute justice. 28 years of predation had ended in 4.7 seconds. But the transformation that followed would echo for decades. In every victim who became warrior, in every predator who faced accountability, in every system that chose protection over betrayal, in every young woman who learned that silence could be strategy, that patience could be weapon, that being underestimated was advantage, and in every man who learned that uniform didn't grant immunity, that institutional protection eventually met individual accountability, that justice always arrived. Sometimes it just needed the right warrior to deliver it. Her phone rang. General Hawthorne. Commander Thorne, we have situation at Quantico. Possible pattern matching crosses methodology. Need your assessment. Timeline, 48 hours. Elena looked back at the training facility. At 30 candidates running evening formation. At Kira calling cadence. Leading. Helping others over obstacles. I'll be there, ma'am. Because this was what Tier 1 meant. Finishing what others started. Protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. From Aldridge to Elena to Kira to 30 candidates who would teach 30 more. The legacy continuing. One warrior at a time. One precise strike at a time. Swift, silent, certain.